Several pieces in portable sculpture explore places and spaces. The artists invite us to think about the homes, cities, and landscapes we live in, our relationships with them, and the memories they hold. This piece by Korean artist Do Ho Suh is a replica of a hallway in one of the artist's previous homes. Made from sheer fabric and wire, the delicate floating structure is life-size, with the frames carefully crafted to form the details of the space: the window frames, the radiator, the door handles. Do Ho Suh has moved around a lot in his busy career as an artist, and he makes lots of sculptures like this, of rooms, sometimes entire buildings, that he's lived in the past. Making them in this way means that they can be folded up into a suitcase and taken with him wherever he goes to next. So let's gather your first reactions to this sculpture. Remember, when it comes to looking at art, there are no wrong answers. We can all see different things and find different meanings in an artwork. What do you think of this sculpture? What words would you use to describe it? Why do you think Do Ho Suh recreates rooms from his past homes like this? Pause the video now and discuss these questions in pairs or groups. Do Ho Suh creates these sculptures of rooms and buildings entirely from memory. He explores the idea that home is a memory rather than a physical place. This sculpture is one of a series of artworks called hubs, which are all replicas of the in-between spaces, the corridors, hallways, and staircases from different homes he's had around the world. He chooses to replicate the spaces that we pass through rather than the rooms we spend lots of time in. He's interested in how we move through spaces and how, when we travel around the world, we move through different cultures while taking part of our own culture with us. Now you know a little more about the artwork, I'd like you to choose some of these questions to discuss, or your teacher might assign different questions to different groups. Why do you think Do Ho Suh makes his sculptures to the exact size of the real space, and include all the tiny details? How would they be different if they weren't life-size, if they were smaller or much bigger than the real room they're based on? Do Ho Suh explores the idea that home is a memory rather than a physical space. What do you think about this idea? How does it relate to the artwork he makes? The structure is made from sheer fabric, rather than a solid material like paper or thicker fabric. Why do you think he chose to use fabric that we can see through? What effect does it have? How would the piece look if he'd used a more solid material? Pause the video now and discuss your chosen questions. In the same room as Do Ho Suh's hub piece, we've also displayed 3 sculptures by Mohamad Hafez, a Syrian artist who now lives in the USA. 2 of the sculptures are made from suitcases, and 1 from a larger wooden box. The sculptures contain detailed miniature scenes of streets in Syria. One, called Green Zone, shows a close-up of a building with a truck parked outside. Another, called A Refugee Nation, includes lots of smaller buildings, all on top of one another in a chaotic scene. The buildings look damaged and dusty, and simple fabric tents are dotted among them. The third piece, called Untitled (Munitions Case), shows what looks like a wall with graffiti on it, with the silhouette of a child. Wires and cables are strung around the box, some with little bits of fabric hanging from them. To the right of the box is another shape, made from scraps of wood and metal. So, what do you think about these sculptures? What do you think they're about? Why do you think he chose to build them in suitcases? Pause the video now to discuss your ideas. Mohamad Hafez moved from Syria to America before the war had started there, but he's now not able to go back to his home country, and his family have had to leave to escape the war. He dedicates these sculptures to the people of Syria, who are now displaced all across the world. Some, like him, were able to leave by choice and settle in a new country, while others are refugees, trying to find a new home, with some living in awful conditions in temporary camps. The suitcases he creates many of his sculptures in have been given to him by refugees. Hafez originally trained as an architect and began making these scenes of Syria when he wasn't able to return home, as a way of dealing with his homesickness. He decided to use suitcases as they are an object that everyone around the world knows, and the object can symbolise the idea of packing up your life and travelling somewhere new. He says that when he moved away from Syria, he was surprised at how portable his life was. But he says he can't imagine what it must feel like to have to pack up your life in a hurry because your town is no longer safe. Alongside the suitcases, the third sculpture is built in a munitions case, which used to hold ammunition like bullets. Why do you think he chose to make a scene inside this kind of box? What do you think the shape to the right of the box might represent? Pause the video now to discuss your ideas. Both of these artworks explore places that the artists have left behind, reconstructed from memory. Perhaps you could create an artwork inspired by a place that you miss. You could make your own miniature street or building using card, plasticine or clay, or you could use our home portraits template from the last series to make a 3D drawing of a room or space. Finally, let's look at a piece by American artist Ensz that explores spaces in a different way. This piece, Convexity, Concavity, is a large sculpture that sits on the floor. It's about 5 meters long and takes up a large area in the gallery. We can see layers of fabric, netting and plastic laid over the top of some kind of structure underneath. We can see wooden pallets poking out from the bottom. The fabric has an image printed onto it and is edged with bright orange tape. What are your first responses to this piece? What does it make you think of? What do you think it might represent? Do the details like the orange tape, rivets, netting and pallets remind you of anything? Where have you seen these kind of things before? Pause the video now to discuss your ideas in groups. Ensz is interested in man-made landscapes and how we, as a human race, are constantly changing the natural shape of the land, particularly through industries like mining. Ensz often uses Google Earth to create images for their pieces, and the image on the fabric you can see here is an aerial photograph of an old mine in America. You can see a few areas with buildings, and lots of lines that show this dusty, hilly landscape where the mines used to be. Ensz makes these sculptures to be very transportable. When exhibiting their work, they send the fabric, netting, and some tarpaulins to the gallery and ask them to build a landscape from whatever rubbish they have lying around. So, under these layers, there's just lots of rubbish that we've collected at the Institute, like cardboard boxes, old bits of furniture, even some old traffic cones. When I look at this piece, I see two different things happening. I see a landscape, almost like a mountain range, but it also reminds me of something you might see on a building site, a pile of materials that have been covered up with tarps, ready to build something, or maybe something that's been wrapped up on a wooden pallet, ready to ship abroad. What do you think? Knowing that Ensz is interested in how we treat the landscape and the mining of resources, what story do you think they might be trying to tell through this sculpture? Pause the video now to discuss your ideas in groups. Ensz has made this piece using a really simple but effective method of making sculpture, creating a 3D landscape using objects and then laying fabric over the top. Perhaps you could try this technique yourself. You could make a mini version of Ensz's piece using random objects, then laying fabric or tissue paper over the top. You could create different kinds of landscapes and add designs to the paper or fabric to create different effects. You could take inspiration from maps, maybe drawing the topography lines, or even images from Google Earth, like Ensz does. I hope you've enjoyed exploring these portable sculptures and that they've inspired you to make your own artwork about places and spaces. We'd love to see what you make, so please share images of your work with us, either via your teacher or directly with us on social media.